Welcome to HappyPorch Radio, the circular economy technology podcast where together with leading experts, thinkers and doers, we explore the intersection of technology and the circular economy.
I'm Barry, the founder of HappyPorch, where we provide software engineering expertise for a more circular economy.
And my name is Jo. I help purpose-driven and circular businesses turn their vision into a story and strategy that moves people to act. In this episode, we're joined by Frans Biegstraaten, founder at BIYU, which is a modular rental and subscription platform designed to integrate effortlessly with your existing business infrastructure. So Barry, what struck you most about the conversation with Frans?
The thing that I enjoyed most about this conversation was the story of the transition from one, type of business to providing the SaaS business. So BIYU was a rental business with 3 physical stores in the Netherlands, and then they pivoted and are now using that learning and the technology they built and providing that as a SaaS platform for other rental and platform as a service businesses. And I find that story really fascinating. One, because they've got this sort of dramatic change and there's an interesting story. But from a technology point of view, going from building in-house software that's intended only for internal use to then the transition to how do we work out how to get that both from a technical and from a usability point of view into a fully fledged platform, which is the product. And the way he described that and the journey they went through and the approach they had, sort of embracing the messiness of it, I thought was really apt and is the way I would approach the same problem. What about you, Jo?
Yeah, I guess I was happy to hear how they were developing the technology from a customer's perspective. So rather than fall into that classic trap of building technology and the customer will come, no, they're actually developing the technology with a customer, but also looking at ways in which they can make it applicable to multiple verticals and multiple businesses. So that fine line between a one-size-fits-all, but also something that really works for all companies in looking to transition or test the waters of having rental as an aspect of their business.
Awesome. So without further ado, let's meet Frans.
Hi, my name is Frans Biegstraaten. I'm one of the 2 founders of BIYU. BIYU is an Amsterdam-based rental company. Started off as a direct consumer rental platform, offering rental products to people, to consumers mainly. And we provided access to products that people sometimes need. And back in 2024, so early last year, we were forced to pivot away from running a consumer rental business and pivoted towards repurposing the platform to a B2B SaaS rental platform. So we ran our own rental business with 3 locations for about 4 years. We've got quite some experience in running a rental business. We came in with 0 experience and we learned a ton and we made millions of mistakes, but we also did a few things right. And so I think combined with the platform, but combined with our experience, first-hand experience, I think we have an interesting offering to rental and PAAS companies in Europe at this moment.
I was going to ask, first of all, just for the listeners, before you pivoted, what kind of things were you renting from the 3 locations?
So we wanted to be the platform where you could basically access everything you occasionally need. So that resulted in eventually 8 categories, from DIY, from gardening, cleaning, kitchen, to mobility, and anything in between. So you could rent an inflatable mattress if you had guests over, but you didn't have a 2-person inflatable mattress, to a drill, a saw, a high pressure washer. But we also had microlinos, the city cars. We had Teslas. You could rent electric cargo bikes if you wanted to move stuff between your home and your girlfriend's home or your office and your home. Kitchen machines, maybe I already said that. Games, anything you would need sometimes, but you didn't really necessarily need to own it. Why would you purchase a high pressure washer if you use it once a year? And the rest of the year, the thing is basically in the way, especially in urban areas where square meter prices are huge. You don't want to use that square meters for storage of high pressure washers and stuff like that.
So a little bit like the PAAS model, but instead of people renting from each other, you were supplying the products yourself.
Correct. Absolutely. So if I go back to all the way to the beginning, we were just super curious, and we were also a little bit surprised to see that during COVID, the streets were basically quiet, but there were queues at the DIY stores. We were like, how is this possible? What are people doing? So we actually went to Praxis, which is around the corner, and there was queues and lines of people, and they were walking out with hedge trimmers, drills, saws, and all these kind of products. And we were like, wow, why are people buying this? Why are they not renting it? Because it's more economical. You make sure you have a good working product, and if you're ready, you get rid of it and off you go. And then we started to look into the rental market, and we started to rent products from different rental suppliers. And then we very quickly found out, like, yeah, no wonder why people are not renting. It was such a horrible process. Like, the consumer journey was like horrendous. You would fill in a form and then maybe you get a reply within 48 hours. Sometimes we were asked to fax. This is not 2010. This is 2020. So we were completely like, wow, there's an opportunity here. Because if you compared the e-commerce situation, where if you have an account at Amazon or in the Netherlands at Bol or Coolblue, if you have an account, it's really 3 clicks and then the product is delivered to your doorstep. It's so easy. It's so tempting to do it. And we thought, if you do the same, if you build the same experience, but then for rental, it's a no-brainer. Why would you not rent if it's hassle-free in the same way as linear e-commerce? So that's actually why we started building BIYU. So Martijn, my co-founder, came up with the idea at first, and then I joined him slightly later down the journey. And once we got all our ducks in a row, we started BIYU. And the reason why we set up our own delivery service, so with our own bikes, electric cargo bikes, electric vans, was because we really wanted to match that experience that Amazon and Bol.com and Coolblue are giving you. And we did not next day delivery, we did same day delivery. Yeah, but that's also very expensive. We realized that probably slightly too late, but doing that is expensive.
You mentioned that you had to pivot and you were forced to do that. What was the reason behind that?
It's not very simple. It's actually very complicated, but from a high level, basically we couldn't get our funding organized in the way that it would help the company move forward. And it was partly understandable, partly very painful, and for a large part a terrible experience, because we had to do this from a Chapter 11 situation. But we managed to get out without bankruptcy, with the trust of the investors. And we're now trying to help companies that rent stuff, rent products, or have a PAAS proposition, product as a service proposition, to organize the back end of their rental, because that's where we had to build so much stuff when we were doing it ourselves, because we couldn't find anything that was fit for purpose. Everything was based on linear, but then you had to hack around it to make it work for your circular business model. And so now we are trying to put that and launch that into the market and got the first customers. And I'm carefully optimistic.
Very good. And those customers, who are those people? How would you describe what types of customers are you working with?
Yeah, maybe before I answer that. So what we try to do is, as I mentioned before, we try to cover basically any product that you occasionally need. So we had 8 categories, right? And what we found, and this is a hard lesson, is that from a helicopter view, that sounds like right. Because if you focus on only, for example, DIY or cleaning, you're on top of mind of a customer maybe once a year, maybe once every 2 years. So the frequency of use would be extremely low. So that's why we thought we need to go broad. We need to have everything. So people have us on top of mind. If they throw a party, they can rent a DJ set and a speaker set. If they want to do some cleaning, they can get a high pressure washer or carpet cleaner, etc., etc. But what we figured along the way is that the marketing and reaching the target groups of these different categories was a nightmare, because the person who is doing DIY is a completely different person than the person that was throwing a party. And it's definitely not to say that the DJ would also rent a hammer and a drill and a saw, and the other way around. So what we basically realized a little bit late down the line is, shoot, our marketing is so fragmented. And of course, you're a startup, so you have small marketing budget, but you had to basically divide it across all these different archetypes of customers. They are on different channels. They are in different communities. They're reading different magazines. They're looking at different websites. So if you want to reach them all, then you have tiny budgets in all segments, and that's not really working. So now with BIYU focusing on helping rental companies to succeed and to organize their backend, we tend to focus on companies that have a specific niche or a vertical, however you want to call it. Maybe niche is not the right word, but a vertical. So our customers are currently in white goods, furniture, and baby and child. And we have a pretty good pipeline in medical and some other verticals. DIY, of course, the traditional where rental is very much accepted.
Established, yeah. And out of interest, the reason you've chosen those, as you've described, is based on your experience. But are you seeing, one of the themes that we've seen through the conversations in this season is how different products and different situations lend themselves to rental more. There's a clearer business or more opportunity there. I assume that aligns with the reason you've chosen those sectors.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So looking back at our own experience, if you have to go a gazillion miles to explain why a consumer should use it, then you're obviously not in the right bucket. And the thing is that in some verticals, for example, the baby and child or toddler, a lot of consumers are already on the track of, okay, I don't want to buy everything because I'm using it for 3, 6, 9 months and then I have to get rid of it. So trying to find those verticals where it really makes sense, where the business case makes a lot of sense. Not because I think, but because consumers think it makes sense. And you see with bicycles, in children bicycles, you see it with baby and child products, but also with furniture. You see it with white goods because you live somewhere, you're an expat or you're temporarily there and you need a washing machine. You're not going to buy a washing machine of 2,000 euros. That's not what you're going to do, but you can rent it for the months that you're there and then you're out and you return the product and it goes to the next one. So it's the verticals where if you're honest to yourself, it makes sense. And that's why we try to focus. And the same for medical.
So you provide them with the software to power that themselves. And do you find there's enough customers in these areas to support what you do?
Yeah, obviously we think so, but it's not like a multi-billion-dollar market yet. But what we can see is that I think around the time that we founded BIYU in the early 2020s, end of, let's say 2018 to 2022, a lot of PAAS companies saw the light. A lot of rental companies started. It was the time when circularity was like basically what AI is now, right? So there was lots of cash, there was lots of VC money flowing to these markets. Same counted for us. And I think there's been quite a strong shakeout over the last 2-3 years. A lot of companies have closed down or they've gone bankrupt or they've been bought by somebody in the same ecosystem. And the ones that have stayed and the ones that have survived, what I can see, and when I talk to the founders or the CEOs of these companies, is that they are now coming out of a loss or a break-even situation. They start to become profitable. The volumes are increasing. So I think maybe today the market isn't huge, but there is also not a high number of companies like us. But what I can see in the right markets, the volumes are increasing. Companies turn to profitability and they realize, shoot, I have hacked my entire backend around the linear thing that's built for linear from a warehouse to another warehouse to a customer and hopefully it doesn't come back. Now I'm getting not 10 orders per week back, but now I'm getting hundreds of orders back every week. Now I need to organize this because otherwise it's going to end up in a huge mess in the warehouse. So I think we're well positioned.
Presumably the software could also be extended or expanded to include like returns or repairs and that kind of thing as well. Yeah, not just rental, but also anything that needs to loop back.
Exactly. So that's what we do. So our 2 key modules are asset management, where you basically set up your product definitions, which is the general description of your products. This is where you set up your hubs and everything. It's more or less the admin console. And then you have the warehouse management module that helps you to, when a product comes in from a supplier, a new product, helps you to serialize it and to put it live into your, let's say, your commerce so that customers can actually rent it. And when it comes back, when the product comes back, you basically scan a BIYU ID that you put on it once you put it live in your commerce environment. And then, of course, you have on a product level defined worksheets. What do you need to do with this product? What do you need to check? If it's the 10th time that it comes back from the 10th customer, you need to do a deep clean, etc., etc. So we take care of making sure that you know exactly which products you have, where they are, for how long, and when they come back. But we also help you to pick, pack, ship. And when the product returns, we help you to put it in cleaning, repair, refurb, and make sure that you put it back live and it can be rented again. And you can do that on a product instance level and on a product definition level. So it provides you with a lot of flexibility. And we've built this ourselves. So we've built this because we used it, because we couldn't find anything. We had PIM, product information management systems, that we looked at. It's a +1 when it comes from the supplier and it's a -1 when it goes out to the customer. There is no +1 back. And when it comes back, it's not new anymore. So it's pre-loved or the second life or whatever our customers call it. But some customers want to rent something that's new. Some customers are perfectly fine with renting something that's a second-hand in case of, for example, a baby and toddler. So your product stock, your stock levels and your instances, they need to match the questions and the requirements from the end customer, end consumer. And we had to build it ourselves. So we spent 4 years building something that worked like a charm in the end. Yeah, and now we're selling it.
That's really interesting. And from a technology point of view, I think that is particularly interesting because, as you said, you built something that was for your own business and operations and so on. Tell us a little bit about the journey then of going from, okay, we have a product that was intended for our purposes and now we're scaling it up to become a SaaS product and a multi-tenant. Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, so one of the things that we decided with the shareholders when we were discussing this pivot is that rather than, again, spending tons of money on building something and then testing it in the market, we really wanted to build with a customer or with customers because that points you towards stuff that you can actually sell and also stuff that people actually need instead of thinking it out on a whiteboard and, oh, everybody needs this. And then you come into the market and like, yeah, great, but we wanted a little bit more. So we wanted to basically build, sell, and use at the same time. And that, in our case, was difficult because our software system was basically a big monolith, which was great for us to use. And of course, there's always some shortcuts that you take, but you don't really mind because you know these shortcuts, you know how to get around them. But now suddenly you need to have other people work with it. They don't know the shortcuts. They don't want to have shortcuts and stuff like that. We first took out that's something that we did anyhow, is we took out the main sort of shortcuts that you can't explain to a third party because they have absolutely no context. So that's one. And then we decided to create an instance infrastructure, sort of hybrid solution where every customer is on his own instance. So it's not possible for one customer to, by mistake, look into somebody else's product stock and the other way around. And that's how we onboarded the first couple of customers. But of course, challenges with that are it is expensive because you need to run 2 databases or 3 databases, 3 environments. And the other thing, which is much more serious, is that, of course, you do a little bit of customization work here in this instance and a little bit there. And before you know it, you've got 15 versions of your instance. And that's no problem on day one. But once you want to migrate everybody to something better, faster, newer, it becomes a huge issue. Because if people have something and they're used to it, you can't take it away and say, we're going back to a new version with limited functionality. At the moment, we are repurposing it to a real, true multi-tenant situation. And our next customer will be already on that new infrastructure. And we expect that by the end of the year, all the other customers are also on the new infrastructure. So we went from a hybrid solution that gave us speed, agility, but not really sustainable. It creates technical debt, if you will. And we're now trying to get that new true multi-tenancy going on.
That sounds really smart, a really intelligent approach. One of the things we've, again, talked about in a few episodes in this season is embracing the messy reality and focusing on that learning, as you said, on the agility. And so it sounds like what you were able to do as you're transitioning from your own product is really apply that learning. You're talking about the tweaks and things. And although that maybe created some technical debt that needed cleaned up, you were prioritizing learning the functionality and the needs and how to solve the problems. And I think that from a technology point of view is so important. Like it's so easy, as you said, to do the whiteboard dream planning, disappear for 2 years and come back with a product that's late and over budget. So, but at the same time, you have to live in this sort of messy middle that you're talking about where you've got, oh no, we have this thing and now we have this migration from one system to another. But despite that, I think that mindset is definitely how I view those sorts of problems.
Good to hear. And also, of course, we're trying to reuse a lot of the code that we have. But of course, 5 years ago, we tried to solve things in a certain way. And with new technology, with new capabilities, there's probably smarter ways to solve some of the issues that we encountered. So we're also trying to use this period to get off any of those legacy sort of stuff that it works, but it's cumbersome or there's other reasons why it's not nice to work with. So it's also a good opportunity to get rid of all the legacy stuff that you're actually sorry for that it's in there, build it towards the next sort of standards. Also, I'm not sure if it's a mistake. I see this at a lot of software companies. You have a bunch of programmers, and there's 3 programmers in our case that we're working on our core system. We call it Bob, and BIYU stands for Bob's Your Uncle.
Yeah, we should have said that at the start.
I should have said that at the start, indeed. And they were all super capable in JS and then in a certain programming language. And our warehouse module was built by another group of programmers, and they were extremely well capable with another programming language. And they talk to each other, no problem. But you want to unify that and bring that under one language. All that stuff we're fixing, and it's nice. One of our key developers from back in the days is back with BIYU since recent. And now he knows why we make choices that we made. He knows the logic, he understands the logic, and he also knows, okay, these parts we can do faster, better if we do it like this and this. So we're doing that, which is super exciting. So yeah.
And have you found it difficult to find good developers?
Now, with the budget that I have, yes.
I can imagine, because I was involved in the launch of Cnoms, the circular platform.
Yeah.
So back around the same time, actually. And there was always the issue around finding good developers. And of course, your technology is only as good as the people developing it in a way. So it's always quite important. But how's your experience been, and how have you dealt with and tackled that one?
Yeah, it's difficult to find really good programmers. It's not difficult to find a programmer, but to find a really good person that can also do a fair bit of architecture and stuff like that, and system design, that's probably difficult. Finding a programmer, I think, is relatively straightforward. And it's interesting because I just read an article this morning in the Volkskrant, one of the major newspapers in the Netherlands, showing that programmers, people with computer science and IT education in the US, are now the 6th or 7th place in people who find it hardest to find a new job because of AI taking over. I send it to our developer this afternoon. What do you think about this? But so I think from what I see also in the market and also in discussions with venture capital firms that we talk to, AI is going to change that for a fair bit, and it will be much more focused on system design and architecture rather than actual programming. And at the moment, I think these terms it's the same. We all call them programmers or developers. But I think that will really disintegrate, and the programming, like the hands, the jobs, will be taken over by AI. And then the platform thinking, the system design, the infrastructure, that will still, and maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe people will send 10,000 of messages that I'm wrong, but how I see it now.
There's definitely nuance in that, but I think I agree with the broad direction of what you're saying. It's not quite as black and white as that, but I think it's certainly the biggest change since smartphones or the internet or something in our industry. But just to segue slightly, let's go back to talking about the product itself and the BIYU product you have. So you described the 2 modules. What does that look like in terms of, like, for a rental business, their full tech stack? What else do they need? What parts of the jigsaw do they need to glue together?
All right. So on a very high level, and there's a gazillion of other stuff, but on a very high level, you need a shop front, right? So let's say you use Shopify, which most people, not all, use. I hear a lot more about shopware, German, of course, WooCommerce there, but let's say your shop front. Then in your shop front, you sort of put all your products that you have up for rent, right? And that needs to come from a PIM, from a product inventory management system. Shopify has a PIM, but Shopify is not made for rental or for PAAS, so it's linear. So what we do is we have our own PIM, which is very similar to the Shopify PIM, but with a lot more information that is rental or PAAS specific. And you can either get that information directly from us and display it into your shopfront, or you sync whatever. So there is some integration there. Then, of course, let's say you're a consumer, you pick your product, you select the time, 12 months, and then you need to go into a transaction kind of module, right? It can be Firmhouse, can be any other company that is handling the recurring payment, because normally with PAAS products, you pay on a monthly basis, and then after 12 months, in this case, in this example, you send it back. If it's a rental, a short-term rental, let's say a day or 3 days or a week or a month, usually it's paid in advance and you can use anything like IGN, Stripe, Molly. But let's say it's a PAAS product for 12 months. So you need to guide your customers through this checkout. And let's say you use Firmhouse for this. They do some checks and they make sure that your payment method is verified and that you actually have an active account or a credit card or whatever you choose. And then at that point in time, you have an order with their product and you have a validated payment method, at that moment, that order has to be pushed into BIYU because our system knows, hey, this is an order that goes to customer. We don't really need to know the customer name or anything, but we need to know address. So we get customer information. We have product or products that are part of the order. And the person in the warehouse needs to start picking. So he or she gets our application and sees on the morning, you log in the morning, you see these 25 shipments need to go out today. You push to the top one and you can see the products and it guides you exactly to the product, to the location of where these products sit. So if you have to pack out a maxi cozy for your Opel Astra, whatever, and you have a specific adapter for it, it guides you like, okay, this is in rack 1, shelf A, or rack A, shelf 1, whatever. So that's all happening in the BIYU. So we pick it, we prepare it for shipment, we create a shipping label. So we connect to, in many of the cases, to DHL. We provide them with the information about the packages or the package, weight, dimensions, and they ship back a shipping label, which we put on the box on a specific area for that. And then it's ready for outbound. So DHL gets a message that between 5 and 6, they can pick it up from the warehouse. That is all done in the BIYU environment because you set up your PIM, you set up your product definition, and you set up your instances with all the variants that you have. Color, size, loft, new, pre-loft, etc. Then the customer uses it, product comes back. We can do that for our customers, but most of the customers don't want to move straight into the full suite, but to stick to the PIM or the asset and the warehouse module. So at the moment, what happens is customers go into their account and they come into the Firmhouse environment and they can print a return label and they bring it to a drop-off point where it's being picked up, depending on what the arrangements are. And then the product comes back into the warehouse. And in the warehouse, the person in the hub basically scans the QR code on the product. And from that moment on, the product is back in the hub. We shoot a message to Firmhouse to say, hey, the product is back. You can stop the recurring payment. If you have an order that contains 3 products, for example, and only one is sent back, you only stop the recurring payment for that one product, but not for the other 2. So that's all built in. And then it goes through the refurbishment steps. Now, this is the situation where our customer runs their own warehouse and is doing that him or herself. There's also brands that we are talking to that say, hey, I have this super profitable linear business up and running. I don't really want to move anything in my operation because this is 10 years of thinking and work and I don't want to intervene with my profitable business, but I do want to see what circularity can mean for my business, for my brand reputation, and for profit, because let's be honest, it can also be a very profitable business. I want to do it outside of everything that I'm doing. And maybe in the future, I will put it in under the same roof. And for that, we have started a cooperation with, for example, Refurbish in the Netherlands. And they take over the entire warehousing, but also the refurbishment and the cleaning. So we can offer, let's say, a complete A to Z solution to a brand where everything happens. It's their customer. It happens on their website. Payment will go through Firmhouse and will be, of course, booked over to the customer. And then the whole warehouse process, the picking package, happens in an outsourced warehouse where they also do the refurbishment and the cleaning and the repair, etc., etc. And they will keep the stock. So once an order comes in through the brand's website, it will be shipped from that warehouse. So I think that's a super interesting solution because it basically, in Dutch we say ontzorgen, you basically take care of the entire end-to-end workflow. We call that the circular operating system. I'm not sure if that's already registered by some. That's what we're trying to do. That's our sort of bigger picture where we can offer that in a single sort of contract go.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense because that's 2 different sort of target customers. The circular first, we do it ourselves. We have our own warehouse. We move things ourselves. And the brand who's exploring or wanting to pilot or setting up as a separate thing. As you said, somebody in an earlier episode talked about warehousing and how often there's just a corner that's doing the returns and it's a mess and nobody likes it. And then the decision makers in that business are going, circular doesn't work. This is an annoying distraction. But that's because, as you said, they haven't got the decades of brilliant optimization that linear warehouses do.
You have to also think, so this is an experience, I won't call any client names, but this is something that we came across quite often is that also in the old BIYU, we work together with brands and we try to help them to get parallel to their business, circular business up and running. And they are all super excited until you tell them, but okay, the product also needs to be cleaned. And they're all looking at each other like, you're going to do the cleaning. No, you'll operate the cleaning. And that's not in my contract. And then they need to set up a cleaning station. Yeah. And it requires, maybe a better way to say it, renting out or PAAS products is very different from selling products. The only sort of commonality is that the product is the same, the rest is different. It always comes back. It needs cleaning. If you don't clean it and if you don't maintain it, it goes to the next customer and mayhem, because that's when customer calls, margin gone, product needs to be sent back on your cost. And if that happens a lot, then people will say it doesn't work. But you can make it work. And also, we made this mistake. We thought, we can use the cardboard box that the product came in originally. And I remember us sending out a high pressure washer. We just put on the label on the cardboard box and we send it to the customer. And we thought, off we go, easy peasy. It comes back completely wet, of course, because there's always residual water analysis. So the whole thing just falls apart on my feet in front of the customer door. He's, I didn't know there was so much water selling there. And then we started talking to this customer and he said, I get this product, but you forgot to add a hose. And then I bought a hose at the DIY center and then it didn't fit my tap because we have 3 different adapters. And he said, I had no idea how to use it. So we were like, oh man, it is so different. So we started working with standard sized plastic recycled boxes. We made our own instructions in English and Dutch, but primarily with pictures because that's fast and people want it fast. We added a hose, we added adapters. So you start to think about, so if people use it or if people rent it, they don't rent it to then go to the store and buy stuff. No, they rent it because they want to use it immediately. Completely different. Selling a high pressure washer in a DIY store is just like woof, 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 out. Now it's your problem. But when you rent stuff or you pass stuff, it's not their problem, it's your problem.
Now it's your problem, yeah. That's actually one of the exciting things I think about circularity, and particularly when we're talking about the sort of service aspect of platform or product as a service type thing. It aligns the incentives of the people producing or delivering the products with the needs of the user, I think. And so that's tough, as you said, as a thing to learn or a mindset, because in order to turn that into a profitable business, which it needs to be. But I think that from a conceptual sort of system level point of view, I get really excited about that. So you're now really trying to care about that person's experience. Is it going to be useful, practical, taking away some of their pain and all of that kind of stuff?
But what I think is really lovely about what you're doing is the way that, although it's a bit messy at the moment, but we talked about that, me and Barry, in a lot of the podcasts about how it's just not clean cut, but that it provides an opportunity to test the concept and for brands to dip their toes in the water in terms of offering rental as part of their service. And I think that's actually where it's at, really, that people are cautious and it's got to make financial sense and it's got to work operationally. So to give them that opportunity to just bolt it on for now and see how that works for them is probably a really good way of pulling more brands on board. And also legislation that's coming will help also stimulate that as well. It's also a question of timing, right? Sometimes the timing's right and sometimes it's not. And going back to when you've started version 1 of the company during COVID, the timing was right for that, to test that. But maybe now the timing's right for more brands and companies to transition to having that as part of their business, which I think it's great then that the technology already is existing and improving to be able to do that.
Well said. Couldn't agree more. The easiest thing for these brands is to make available their own products because, that's the thing they don't lack.
If you had to pick an iconic Dutch brand that you would love to use your technology, who would it be? It doesn't have to be Dutch, actually. It could be any brand. But I presume at the moment you're working mostly within the Dutch market, but the technology could be extended to any business across.
Funny enough, our first customers were all non-Dutch.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, so it's really a European play. That's also because the market is still developing also in the Netherlands. So the Netherlands alone is not big enough.
So where are they then? You said your first customers weren't Dutch.
In UK, Sweden and the Netherlands, and quite a number of good opportunities in France, Belgium, but also in Germany. So it's basically across Europe. Of course, if you think of volume, I would think Philips. I don't think the brand Philips Medical is still owned by Philips and it's still Dutch. But I'm doubting whether Philips is still Dutch. I think it's actually bought by a Chinese firm. But anyway, so Philips would be super interesting for household appliances in the PAAS model. Maybe even shaving as a service, FiliShave. I also know that LG is doubling up in their rental and subscription on their products. So that's TVs, DVDs, whatever. So there's lots of, there's if you can think like that, there's like a gazillion opportunities. Kerger is a partner that we've worked with in the past for many years. It would be a fantastic brand to actually really roll this out with. Steel for gardening. Yeah, there's plenty of. So if I could pick and choose, I can choose 10 and then it's 3 years we're busy. But it takes a lot of convincing and it takes a lot of guts from people on the other side. That's always easy to say, they're all stupid. No, but they have to put budget in there. Somebody needs to go onto their website and do stuff. Sometimes that's not done in this country, but it's done in the country where the headquarters is. And they're like, we're not going to change anything for you. Why? So there's a gazillion gates that you have to go through, and it takes effort and it takes also persistence. And, I think people are addicted to things that go fast and quick. And as soon as things take persistence and time, sometimes months, sometimes a year, and people have targets, it's very easy to say, okay, next year we'll look at it again. And they go for their sales targets because they get paid partly because of their sales, right? It takes also people with guts and with a belief in that something needs to change in our consumer behavior to actually move the needle. And in some companies you can find them, and in other companies I haven't been able to find them. But I'm sure they are there, but I just knock on the wrong door. You also need to find each other. That's another problem. How can you find those people in the companies that are actually looking for this? I mean, I'm sure they're there, but tell me which door to knock and I'll start knocking.
That's a good segue for our next question. For those listening who want to find out more about what you do or get in touch, where should they go?
They should go to www.BIYU.world or .nl or .de, and you can read all the information about what we do. You can also fill in your details for a live demo, and we'll schedule in a demo of the platform, or we can just do a video call. That's also fine.
Brilliant, thank you. And as usual, we'll share the links that you've mentioned there in the show notes and on HappyPorchRadio.com for those listening to check out. Thank you so much. I know we could have continued talking there for the same time again, so I really appreciate that. I really appreciate your time in sharing all of that. It's fascinating to hear your story and looking forward to hearing and seeing future success with BIYU. Bob is your uncle.
Thank you, Joe. And if people reach out to you to reach me, just feel free to share my contact details, and I look forward to talk to them. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoy and benefit from these conversations, please help us share with others. Just take a moment to rate and review on your favorite podcast app. Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by HappyPorch.com. Whether you need bespoke software development, fractional CTO support, or just expert advice, HappyPorch is here to support your circular economy initiatives. If you're driving innovation and circularity, we'd love to chat. Your hosts were Barry O'Kane and Joe Weston. Barry is a software engineer, leader, and entrepreneur with over 20 years' experience. He founded HappyPorch to help you create web and software solutions that support the shift to a regenerative circular economy. Joe helps purpose-driven and circular businesses turn their vision into a brand and story that moves people to act. She works with teams at tipping points, ready to scale or reposition for greater impact.